Welcome to a new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta. It has been a tough year for advertisers, and 2021 is likely to bring new challenges to the evolving industry. To get a sense of the opportunities and what advertising will look like in 2021, Anant Rangaswami, editor of Melt, spoke to Malcolm Poynton, Global Chief Creative Officer, Cheil Worldwide Network. Malcolm joined Cheil Worldwide at the beginning of 2015 as the network's first ever Global Chief Creative Officer. Today, he will tell us about the challenges he foresees for marketers in the coming year. Let's get ready to melt with Malcolm Poynton.
Morning, Malcolm.
Good morning, Anant. Good to see you.
Good to see you. And you're now in cold and frosty Seoul, I think. Is that
That's
right?
correct. That's correct. Yeah, the mercury's dropping pretty quickly here now at this time of year, as are the beautiful, stunning colored leaves off all the trees. I must say, it's quite a sight.
Fantastic. So let's come down to earth from that pretty landscape.
Yeah.
And I want to understand from you, you're heading a large global network agency. What are your biggest challenges that you foresee in 2021?
Well, I think there are a couple of challenges that hit us pretty head on, and that is that, of course, the world has been focused on many things global for such a long time, especially brands and marketers in terms of understanding, the efficiencies and effectiveness of global marketing. I think what's happened is we've had this, unforeseen pandemic hit us, and people talk about it as a global pandemic, but I see it as a very local pandemic. And I bring our global team together weekly on calls, and you would be really, truly amazed at just how different this is in different countries and how it's affecting the economies of the countries in very different ways. And so I think one of the biggest challenges we have is this kind of shift that's necessary even for global brands to really understand what it is to connect a global brand in a local market. And I think for our creative team, as we've been trying to get cohesion and consistency on global campaigns, it's really now an opportunity for us, as much as a challenge, to get the mindset into understanding much more deeply how that can resonate on a local level, given the circumstances in those markets. And that really, I think, shifts the mindset creatively as well, of finding, well, what are the opportunities there? And that, for me, is exciting. It connects to a whole new landscape of how you connect brands with consumers. So the rise of the opportunity to connect brands through gaming platforms rather than traditional media, the rise of the opportunities to really connect brands in very exciting ways through, SNS and direct messaging platforms that exist in especially markets in Asia, is a really exciting and fresh way of thinking as well. So those are the challenges I see, is that, balancing this global with local, and then really getting our creatives deeply immersed in what are the contemporary opportunities and places to connect brands with consumers, not just according to the historic media landscape.
So you said you have a number of challenges. You broadly touched upon only one, which is that each country has to be measured by its own challenges, and you don't have such a thing as a global challenge at the moment. So what are the other challenges you're facing? For example, in your work process and your meetings and the inability to travel and so on and so forth. How has that been a challenge to you?
Well, I think we're really fortunate as a network to be very different to others, and that, we do work remotely very well across time zones. We're structured that way. My global team, we draw on teams across time zones at different times. We don't set up every office to be a duplicate of itself in terms of its capability. So we're always collaborating across time zones and using technology. So perhaps for us, that's less of a challenge than it might be for other agencies in the industry. That said, I do think one of the challenges that doesn't fall uniquely to us, but I think is industry-wide, is at a certain point throughout a calendar year, the ability to bring people together like you would do, with a Z-Melt festival, like you would do with a Cannes festival or something. I think that is an important thing in terms of the landscape of our industry. And for me, the challenge there is, at what point can we get the broader community together to really share and exchange ideas in that way? we're constantly doing it daily, weekly through video conferencing and things of that nature. But really, there's a limit to the scale of people that you can get together interacting in that way. There have been some really interesting things in the last few months where, there's lots of different rooms set up for conferences that you can drop in and out of. But I think it's actually just that challenge that we have where there's no free conversation that's kind of moving the shape of the industry because it's people coming together. So I would say that's, probably the biggest challenge I see in terms of progress for the industry and us, frankly, as an agency as well.
So now, in your role, you keep talking to clients across the country, not just one continent.
Yeah.
Across the globe, not just one continent.
Yes.
So tell me, if you had to pick up common threads of the pain or the challenges that clients are facing right now, which they articulate to you, how would you describe them?
So I would say that there are two things I'm hearing constantly from clients. One is pretty obvious: uncertainty. It really stifles progress for a client. Uncertainty in terms of marketing spend, uncertainty in terms of how to market, uncertainty in terms of how the landscape is changing around the category they're in, right? This is a huge challenge. And it's something that, we talk a lot in our industry about data and the power of data, and we're very deep in that space as a company, and it really excites us. But there is only, as we see with elections, there's only so much data modeling that can foresee anything in the future. It's more about real-time data that we're dealing with and what's happening here and now. And I think really that uncertainty is causing a lot of pain in terms of projections and where to market. I think the second point that I'm hearing consistently is one that may not surprise any of us really, and that is the number of marketers who feel caught in a legacy model of either marketing or of distribution of product or of ways that they're connecting to consumers. And I think that actually is probably the thing that is most exciting in many ways, because it's the thing we can most tangibly help with and do things with. And I know certainly for us, that is, right in the middle of where we are as a kind of agency that's got mobile and technology in our DNA. It's a really great relationship and conversation that we're having with clients that's opening up so many new avenues and opportunities of how we connect their brands to consumers. And that I think I would frame as the two consistent things I'm hearing.
Now move on to another area where Cheil is invested significantly in. One is the impact of Brexit. The second is what's happening in the US.
Yes.
And the third is the Olympic Games. These are all things which are going to hit us, starting with Brexit, perhaps next with the impact of the US elections, and finally the Olympic Games. So tell me how you're going to navigate these three, and what is Cheil doing? What are you doing to sort of navigate these three areas?
So I think first, Brexit's an interesting topic in itself, because I think
when did you come back from London? When did you reach Seoul from London?
4 weeks ago now. Right, so I had to do 2 weeks in quarantine, government quarantine here in South Korea. They changed, funnily enough, the day that I boarded the plane that was due to board the plane. They changed the entry requirements for New Zealand citizens here, so I had to get a different visa. That took some time, and I finally got here and got through the quarantine. But Brexit's an interesting one, right? I think a lot of people think Brexit is a UK problem, and to some extent that's true, but actually it isn't. It's a European problem, and it's causing chaos across Europe. And I think the European markets are in chaos. You can see that the financial markets are in chaos. The markets for every client you can imagine in Europe are in chaos compared to many other parts of the world. And I think what Brexit has done, it's compounded the situation with the pandemic, where countries are retreating back into trying to stand on their own 2 feet. They're being very defensive. There's other issues that are manifesting at the same time around terrorism threats, and it's a very, very uncertain time. So what does that mean? I think what it means is that the British psyche and what's happening in Britain is very fragile at the moment. And I think what's really important about that is understanding the power of creativity to really actually play a role in British society during this period of these Brexit uncertainties. And I think what we're seeing, which is very exciting in that, is that, we, for instance, with Samsung, we are doing work in that market, which really, really changes the way in which, they are supporting people in there. And actually, I must say, part of this is inspired by a previous program that we did in India with technical schools for Samsung. And I think, we did these 20 schools in India that were really aligned with the government's micro and small medium enterprise ministry approach. And we've taken that kind of, if you like, that lens of Skill India into what we're doing in the UK with setting up something called Not a School, which is an online learning platform in the UK, which is giving a real focus, actually different perhaps than technical school. This is around creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking. And it's offering that to people who otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity. And it's actually bringing in, real game changers to be leading that program. So we've got some very contemporary editors-in-chief, Liv Little, and we've got a climate activist, Jack Harries, and others involved in leading these keynote, if you like, deliveries in Not a School for this broader spectrum of the community who otherwise couldn't get that. And it's supported by, or in partnership, I should say, with FutureLearn, which is part of the British Open University. So it's a really, really robust platform, open to 12 million learners. And I think this sort of thing is becoming really important in terms of our creative thinking to help change, the attitude and the mood in the society. On an equally important note, I would say that John Lewis and Waitrose have done an amazing job in terms of what they've done for their Christmas ad, right? It's all around give a little love. This is not heavy retailing. This is actually understanding the psyche of the British public at this time and really setting about to support them. It's done in conjunction with Homestart, who support families in challenging times, and Fair Share, who fight hunger and tackle food waste. So it's got genuine roots into, supporting the community. And this, I think, is what we're seeing and needing more of at this time in Britain. So, the market's under extraordinary pressure, but behind that, there's a bigger, more important issue, and that's the fragility of the consumer mindset. And I think this is why we're seeing creativity play such an important role at this time.
Let's go to the US and your understanding of what the US economy and therefore your business has to gain or lose in the US.
I think from outside the US, we can all appreciate it's a very divided time. It's divided along political lines, it's divided along opportunity, gender, race. There is a lot going on there. It's a very, very complicated story. And I think, again, what you tend to see is some very contradictory behaviors in the market. We see acceleration in property values, and yet we see tightenings of belts on spending. We see, as people say, the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer, and the middle perhaps getting left behind. And so I think, definitely there are very difficult and challenging times ahead for 2021 as we look at it. But I think what I would say is that we're starting to see a much more profound optimism rising in that market. And I think that perhaps some people may say, well, that's only because we're starting to get more of a balance in the media, because we've got someone who's sort of a more perhaps positive and more experienced political nature coming into the fray. Maybe that's true, but at a broader context, you've got to say there is a more positive shift and optimism in the society. And I think there's what I would say quite quickly going to build in 2021 is some confidence coming back into that US market around their own domestic market and around their own progress as a nation. So I'm thinking 2021 I see as quite an optimistic year for North America. I think we're just in this state of flux at the moment where there's a lot of frustration, a lot of uncertainty. They still don't have their game plan around the pandemic very clearly articulated within the US broader, society from a federal government level. And so, you do find every state is very, very different. Like I was saying, it's not a global pandemic. Even in the States, it's a very local pandemic, right? Some states are living in fear, some are living in hope. But I think generally, 2021 is going to be a very positive year compared to where the last couple of years have been headed for North America.
And now come to the Olympics.
Yeah.
The 2020 Olympics, it's become a 2021 Olympics. And players like Samsung have been very involved in sport. So
Yes.
tell me how you expect the Olympics to play out. And the impact on advertising and on you.
Yeah, so I think it's a shame, isn't it, that the Olympics is such a powerful connector for the human spirit and for our kind of collective outlook of progress, and to have that put on hold, and now the latest I hear to be scaled back significantly. That's really a shame for all of us. I think what's in doubt is really about even how far the Olympics go ahead next year, is just how much participation. They are scaling it back. The investment's being scaled back. There won't be much of an audience. And so we need to understand what that means in advertising context for brands. Does it mean because you don't have stadiums full of people aren't so excited to tune in and watch? When we look at the trends at the moment around soccer and baseball, actually, that's not necessarily the case. It depends really on how much someone's a fan of that sport. But then if you go to other countries where we're seeing stadiums full, where the sport is going on, would they really want to watch something with an empty stadium? Those people who are used to that, excitement and drama. So I think there are a lot of question marks at the moment. I actually think that the IOC are being incredibly optimistic about what they think they'll achieve in terms of hosting the games next year in Tokyo. I think that perhaps they're painting a more optimistic picture than the world may see. I know their latest announcement last week was saying that all athletes and all spectators would have to be vaccinated before attending. We don't even know if there is a vaccine that will actually have that widespread of distribution. So I think there are still very big question marks around it. It's hard for a brand. I don't think it's appropriate for brands just to walk away from it because, it is an important thing and it does need support, and it's every 4 years. It's not every year. It's to do with a brand's values and its commitment as to whether they continue to participate. And all I can say is that, the brands that do stand by and continue certainly will be regarded and respected for doing that.
Right. And now we come to India. India is a country, thankfully, that you're involved in. It's not just a country on the map. So tell us what you think from the inputs you've got, we'll see in India in 2021.
Well, again, I think there's real cause for optimism. And the thing that's excited me during the challenges of this year is to see some of the innovation and progress in India that really goes back to some of my earlier comments around discovering new ways to connect brands to consumers. And when we start to see things where we have got assisted selling through WhatsApp, where we're having, real live stream selling, which is a massive trend that we're very conscious of and involved in China, for instance. I think people may not appreciate the scale of business which actually can be done through these platforms. And so I look at India at the moment and I think, what? I'm seeing things that I've never seen in the other markets, perhaps maybe in China, perhaps maybe in one or two other Asian markets. But I think there's a lot going on that's changing there that's really getting a leapfrog from the traditional legacy models of distribution and media. And that's exciting. And, I think you mentioned earlier to me in conversation, Anant, with Sir Martin Sorrell and S4 Capital going in there. And I can vouch, from my time with Sapient, the depth and capability of digital and technology related parts of our industry in India is unparalleled. And so seeing that start to come into the marketing communications fray makes me look at 2021 as saying, I'm expecting a lot of fantastic things to be happening in India in 2021.
Right. And so the last question before I let you go to your day in Seoul is, are we going to see sort of a stream of boring advertising because we move more towards performance rather than on brand. You spoke about the Waitrose example.
Yeah.
In India, almost everything we've seen during the festival season is performance. We've
Yes.
hardly seen any brand work. So what is your pun for 2021? Are we going to see the same?
I think actually it's a great question, Anant. And I think, the pendulum swings on these things. I think we saw, a massive fixation around programmatic marketing in the last few years. And I think when we looked at it, we couldn't really, as an industry, point to any programmatic marketing that really excited us. And then all of a sudden, a few interesting things come along and people's eyes get opened like, Whopper Detour, where people suddenly understand, wow, that's probably the smartest, data collection model that we've seen for a fast food group. We start to see other examples come along that do things differently, more creatively, where we start to think, wow, that is not creative that we know in terms of a TV ad, but that is seriously, very smart, very good creative thinking and quite exciting. So I think what we're going to see, to your point, is we are going to see a lot of people throwing a lot of effort behind, performance marketing in a very matter-of-fact manner that's purely aimed on conversion. And I think we're going to see a coalescence of these things where creativity starts to be imbued into those spaces. And I would say, as we go through the course of next year, we'll see more and more exciting examples of that. And I pointed at the top of the show or the top of the conversation to some examples of, us going into the gaming world. We just launched a beer in Latin America for Brahma, the second biggest brewer there. Just as all the bars were shut down for COVID, we opened a bar. And people said, what, are you crazy? You can't open a bar, everything's shut. Well, we opened a bar in a gaming platform that was over 18 rated. So you had no problems with, alcohol laws. And there was a whole scenario that people had to participate in behind that to get into the bar, which took them through the whole brewery in the first place. And this was just the most fantastic success, and it's performance marketing, right? It's all tracked, it's all data related, and it's all driven to conversion of sales. And I think this is just a real creative lens on what we would otherwise see as just traditional data-led performance marketing. But the opportunities are so unknown to us. And that's what is going to be slowly revealed as we go through 2021. So to your point, I think, that we may be going to see a dip in terms of what we used to from brand creativity, but I think we're going to see it merge in way more unknown, interesting, and exciting places like the example I just gave.
Fantastic. So that's a lovely way to end the interview. And I hope we meet at ZMelt physically in 2021. I
certainly hope so.
A vaccine has been found, and I hope we've all been vaccinated with it. So cheers and have a fantastic 2021.
Cheers, Anant, and same to you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Bye for now.
And that was Malcolm Poynton explaining how brands need to find new ways and opportunities to connect with consumers and what marketers can look forward to in 2021. Now here's presenting the Melt cheat sheet. Global brands need to connect in a local market in order to fit local opportunities. Uncertainty is one of the biggest challenges for marketers across the globe. There is a need to cultivate creativity in time of crisis. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of Melt. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Our handle is Ready to Melt. Stay connected with our daily Melt update on our website, readytomelt.com. And I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Goodbye.